got to be quite agile.
It's the age-old conversation of translating what real value is.
And keep it different, keep it interesting. There's so many other touch points around social media. So it's how it's all working together, I think, is really important. And that's really the story I really like to tell.
Welcome to the Social Media for Business podcast. I'm Rebecca Bridgen, your host, and today's guest is Kathleen, or rather I like to call her Katie, Tunkina, Group Marketing Director at ABL Group, and she leads marketing across the group's brands, including ABL, AGR, OWC and Longitude, bringing a deep focus on the energy and maritime sectors. This episode zooms in on social strategy and ROI. We'll get practical about choosing the one outcome that your socials absolutely must own this month, building a simple strategy, plan and measurement loop, and deciding when to kill or scale a social campaign. We'll talk about attribution that leadership respects, experiments that you can run, well, ideally, theoretically in 4 weeks, and which metrics actually predict pipeline from social without chasing vanity numbers. So what really matters? I'm going to start this episode with, if you could only keep 3 social metrics to defend your budget, which 3 make the cut? And what gets dropped? So Katie, welcome.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here. I hope I can share some interesting insights from what I've gleaned from the world of social media that's constantly evolving, as you know. Yeah, metrics. I mean, I think it's important to say that I actually don't do a lot of advertising. So I don't do a lot of paid sort of social media in the current sort of landscape of any ABL Group. My key metric really actually is the CTR, the click-through rate. I really want to showcase actually that against website traffic and then generating leads. So kind of mapping that against the marketing funnel, I think is really important when you're sort of talking to senior leadership, and hopefully showing that against some CRM data as well, so that you can really kind of show how it works within the journey right through to conversion. But other secondary and tertiary metrics, I'd say actually I'm very interested in kind of reposts and comments, because for me a big part of something that we're constantly working on is really our employee advocacy of the messaging that we're putting out. And I do find if we get via our internal comms, our employees, and we do see it a lot more, resharing, commenting, reposting our content, obviously that pushes us out much further, much wider to even more targeted audiences in very targeted markets or different countries, because we're completely global. So that's also something that I do like to look at. And, I like to look at as well, actually, a little bit of the metrics around, not so much the visitors, but followers. I do think it's a bit more vanity. If you're able to map that or find some trends with your click-through rate, and then trends on lead generation or conversions on the website, I mean, that's really great. And especially if you can then tee that up with some of the demographics. What I find is brilliant is if you've planned a campaign that's specifically around a country and a certain market, and you can genuinely see we are actually getting an uptick of followers there, and that's generating into an uptick of followers on the website in that country. And we have seen that.
That's really interesting when you were talking about the matching up the content that you put out to the demographics, to know whether you are really targeting, the people that you're trying to target are actually the ones that are receiving it. Is there a software that you use to bring in that data, or is it sort of LinkedIn own or whatever? I never asked you that.
I'm actually a bit basic. I'm trying to be a bit more sophisticated on the data side of things, but no, it's a LinkedIn own, and then actually teeing it up with various data sets that we see. We do have an SEO consultant, brilliant SEO consultant that I've worked with for a really, really long time. So teeing it up with some of that data there on the conversions, and then as well looking at our CRM, we can definitely get more sophisticated on it. It's something that I definitely want to continue doing, but I'm always, because we're so global and we are growing all the time, it is really important, I think, for senior leadership to, because they often say, well, who's reading this? I mean, it looked like only staff liked it. But then if I can show, well, actually, we got a lot of staff to reshare it in that country, and we can see an uptick in that country or in that particular field, then you can start to really paint a picture. The other thing anyway is, for me, I definitely read a lot about that sort of long-term brand health versus the short-term gains. And that is a really important thing to kind of manage people's expectations in, because I think it's really important not to lose that. And that's all part of that story building. I want to show the metrics of where people are resharing, they're really engaging with it, and then you're seeing an uptick in different audiences and a wider sort of pool of audiences, because we do work across so many different planes.
Yeah, and I think it's the age-old conversation of translating what real value is to, like CFOs and people who are very numbers and data orientated, because actually with social media, you can't separate the two. And in general marketing, full stop, really, you can't separate the two. It's that sort of trying to, how do you translate? It's like you're speaking two different languages. So how do you find that common ground to explain what you're doing and where the value is in the long term, with data, with figures and things like that?
So we have a very clear marketing funnel. People are used to BD, the sales funnel, and I've really mapped that out to marketing. And I think it's really important to try and educate people across the group in that. And I think that's very helpful in helping different marketers to marry up the different data sets that you can see to paint that story, whether it be a straight sale, a straight conversion, which has happened, or actually it is helping to build further that brand equity for the long term. Of course, now if we're talking about paid advertising, I should mention we've done a couple of projects in the past, and that's mostly product based. And obviously I think there should be more focus on those conversions and how that's supporting that, and closely watching that so you can continue to curate and amend. But again, there is as well, I think, a good argument depending on what the demographics of the people that are picking that up for that brand building. So we did it once in the USA, I remember, which is such a massive market. It's quite a while back, and there was definitely, for me, quite a large argument. It was ahead of a big conference, to do that, to try and actually build more reputation, because it's such a crowded marketplace. And it worked, because then people went to this conference and they said there was an uptick in people. Yeah, I know that brand name, I know what you do. So that for me is a win as well.
Yeah, I mean, I always say that social media pairs so beautifully with events. And would you agree then, because you're going down the route of that sort of long-term relationship building via social, that actually social media generally owns and could own, if seen in this way, employee culture and that social aspect for the longer funnel?
What I love about social media is it is that more personal interaction with people. It's telling a story for people to engage with. Somebody mentioned to me, a senior colleague quite recently, that actually she found that even though it's an external medium, social media is such a powerful tool for staff, for colleagues to kind of get to know the company and to really engage in the culture. And I couldn't agree with that more. It's just a slightly less formal way of bringing the news, new contract wins, maybe quite a serious insight or white paper to a much wider demographic. And that's great, because that is really what marketing is all about, isn't it? It's really reaching different people on a quite personal level. So, I mean, where I think social media can really own stuff is it is very much that dissemination on a more personal level, to really engage, drive traffic and drive interest and engagement into different things. And I think from a colleague standpoint, it's always been quite a powerful tool for us. We've got Instagram as well as LinkedIn, and I find Instagram is very much, we try and keep that as more of a kind of people first channel. And actually, interestingly, we only have that for the umbrella brand. We don't have it for all of the other brands, because for me, I see it as a really good tool to kind of bring all that cultural aspect of the business, which is also interesting to clients, because they see the personal aspect behind the business. And at the end of the day, we're a consultancy, so we're all about people. So I think that's really nice.
So which 3 metrics live on your social ROI dashboard, Katie?
Very much the click-through rates. I mean, I'd like to show the impressions, but I think that is a real vanity piece, to be honest. But the click-through rates is really, really key. I think that I like to showcase kind of different engagement, the sort of, if we see comments going up and that the repost, because we have seen that, and that actually helps to show an ROI as well from our internal communication standpoint. So that's really important. And then showing demographics, that's really key. It's a big interest to stakeholders across the different countries to see that we are getting growth in maybe different markets that we're targeting. And because that's always, I think, the danger with social media, it can be very generalized, and it's always bringing it back to kind of the who, what, where, why, how are we targeting this? Because at the end of the day, you want to capture somebody. So
for a quick tester in 1 minute, so it's a bit of a challenge, Katie, can you walk us through your social loop? So what you would do for content pillars, distribution, conversion path, and how you would maybe create a 4 4-week experiment for something like that in a theoretical, perfect universe?
Yeah, so I mean, we work very much on a campaign basis, campaign projects, / as well brand stories. So we've got our sort of predefined content pillars that work for the brand that we're trying to push out, the brand story that we're trying to promulgate, and also that work with our campaigns. So we would look very carefully, again, the who, what, where, why, really ensure that's at the core of that campaign, and then curate those content pillars against that campaign to try something, to formulate something that would work based on that targeted piece that we defined. And then it's about watching the data, seeing how it's working over a period of time. For 1 month, let's say it was very sort of quick fire defined, like for a conference, obviously probably following that on a weekly basis and seeing what's working, what's not, and being quite dynamic and agile. I think that's really important. But also seeing maybe what other tools could we deploy in our tool frame, like internal communications, maybe to help push this out further, help get that word out, maybe with some different social pieces in a newsletter or whatever to get to different clients. So so sort of watching that and watching the numbers, seeing maybe what really works, got a real uptick maybe versus what's not, and then adapting as you go along. I wouldn't necessarily, I mean, if it's only the time frame is only for a month, I wouldn't necessarily kill it unless literally like every single message is just getting nothing and disappearing, but then I wonder what I'm doing, full stop. I think you do with any campaign, with any content loop, you've got to be quite agile, and you've got to be looking at the range that you're putting in and what people are receptive to, what different people are receptive to, and keep it different, keep it interesting. When you're curating a plan, that's why I've got the different content pillars that we defined quite a long time ago, because it's got to mix it up a little bit. I think people like variety. You don't want to see the same thing over and you don't want to see the same branded content every single day. It feels like you're just being sold a story all the time. Longer term, again, it's really important to always be looking at what's going well, what's not, against different campaigns, and again be agile, moving around with it. Because I would, unless it's paid, of course, which is slightly different, if it's not paid and there is some receipt, there is some engagement with it, it could be just a question of fine-tuning or mixing it up a bit more. But I would suggest that is hopefully building into the brand equity piece, so that long-term piece that we've been speaking about. So I wouldn't necessarily be so quick to just kill something unless it just really isn't working. And obviously there's so many other touch points around social media. So it's how it's all working together, I think, is really important. And that's really the story I really like to tell.
Yes, to consider the metrics that are coming in from other marketing channels. And actually, we had a conversation yesterday when we were preparing for this podcast about something that I absolutely loved. A friend of mine, Richard Holsworth, mentioned when he was working for Shell. How do you know when it's working? Because sometimes it's really difficult, but the only way to really know is to pull the plug and see what happens, which is a risk as well in itself.
Well, I remember quite a long time ago, I won't take responsibility, I wasn't around at the time. Somebody said, oh, yeah, we stopped doing the Meet the Team blogs. Yeah, it's boring. We see it every week. No one's interested. And I was a bit surprised. I thought, well, people like to read about their colleagues, actually. This usually gets a big hit. And through that engagement, I find that actually clients like to read about the people they work with. It's incredible. There's a really nice sentiment. So we started doing again, it's just mixing it up a little bit, because the feedback did come through that, well, we never see our people, you see maybe ships and rigs and things, which is also great, and people love seeing that. But again, it's that variety you need to capture. And you're right, sometimes you need to maybe stop something to realize that people did miss it and they did value it, and then they might actually engage even further with it when it's back. It is a risk, so you have to be careful with what you do it with. We haven't done polls for a long time. I used to do polls quite regularly, and I think that's a really fun way of engaging with the audience. And again, I actually think polls shouldn't be taken too seriously. Go for something that's a bit softer, but definitely we're going to try and do that again this year and see if there's a bit of a change, see if it adds a bit of a difference, maybe to, if we're disseminating information about an upcoming delegation to a conference, and then you can test the waters with that a little bit.
Yeah, it is a great, I mean, polls are a great market research tool, aren't they? Effectively, and it really helps, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's just it's great to get that dialogue starting to flow. It's quite fun. I know we've done some in the past. Vote for your favorite merchandise at the end of June or something when we've done a big conference. So obviously that's not really related to the work we're doing, but you get this sort of cross section of people from different conferences that we've been to, plus colleagues who then push it out further, who start to sort of engage in it. that's quite good market research to then go, well, clients actually really loved that branded fan that we did. We should do that again next year. Because of course, merchandising is always a difficult one to get over the line from a budget perspective. So
yeah, unfortunately it is. So given that you really love the click-through rates as one of your sort of go-to ROIs, what kind of formats do you think drive more click-through rates? Obviously polls might be one of those because you were just talking about that.
Because I haven't done polls for a while, I probably couldn't comment right now on that. I think about this a lot, to be honest. And actually, I think there's lots of formats that can work differently. And really, it's very much actually about the content that is going in there, to be honest. I think videos are brilliant if used carefully and not, and quite sparingly, not constantly are done. And obviously you need a fantastic videographer, which I'm very lucky. I work with someone who's really talented on this. But I think that short, sweet, snappy videos, you let them do the talking, really. And I think they're interesting because they do last a long time. You know, I have noticed through others or feedback that, you know, a video we might have posted quite a long time ago seems to pop up again and again. So their lifespan is much longer than other things. But then actually, I do notice, you know, carousels, they're done carefully, again, not too long, they can be really effective. And I've also noticed just a straight out PDF starting to actually get quite a lot of interest. So that's a really interesting piece. And I have noticed commentary that is beginning to pick things up. But I have to say, and I think you agree with this, when we look back consistently quarter on quarter, year on year, what people are really chiming with, it's a people story, you know, and it can be a lot of the Meet the Team vlogs actually get a lot of interest. You're really sharing a very personal window into somebody's intelligence and into their insights, into how they work, and also a little bit into their lives. Also, we share lots of stories about job changes, promotions, new country managers, and these get really, really good engagement rates with. Of course, I think the imagery is so key that goes with it. You've got some great imagery and people imagery, people on site. It's very much a content-based thing. I think it does change all the time about what people are really going with and what they're not. I think the image is really key. I mean, we have a ship design part of our company, and we sometimes share renders, which are gorgeous, of the ships that they've done. And again, the click-through rate is very, very strong. People are interested in that. But it's all to do with that sort of quite sexy imagery, I think.
Yes. Well, I think those sorts of images are quite sexy. I know not everybody else agrees, but I personally quite like looking at them because
who
I just
doesn't
find
love
them
a
fascinating.
PSV?
I know, right?
What's wrong with people?
Fab. Okay, so you've mentioned different groups and different social sites being relevant for different sections of who you're trying to communicate. What works where? What do you put out on LinkedIn? You've mentioned you have an Instagram. I'd love to hear your thoughts if you're considering a TikTok at any point in the future. That would be quite interesting for us.
Gosh, I haven't thought about that for a while, actually. Gosh, I have considered TikTok quite a lot. Yeah, okay. So, and we've also got YouTube. I actually love YouTube. I find YouTube really interesting, particularly for the industry that we work in. I think there's a lot of potential there because you kind of can build these libraries of content, these tech talk libraries that people and spotlights on different things that we do, and it's a great place. We do lots of briefings and very sort of quite technical talks to different parts of the market, and you can store all that information there in different libraries. And then I would use LinkedIn to help disseminate that further. LinkedIn is, you know, social media is a great way to sort of, in a slightly more informal way, of bringing your corporate news to everyone. But it's still probably the more sort of formal, the more where I would put, you know, our PRs, our corporate insights, really share all the different things that are happening across the company. And then occasionally, you know, we usually sort of Fridays, we might have a bit more of our social roundup and team pictures, which I still think is really important content. And just as we're talking about, actually a lot of it can get really well picked up because people love to get a view into the culture of a company. We are as people, really. So people love to see people they work with, people that are working for them, and what they're up to and on their team gatherings. Whereas definitely Instagram I see as much more of that cultural piece, maybe bringing the sort of larger group corporate news. But for me, it's much more pictorial, it's much more image based, and bringing a short snippet stories, I think, via those pictures, and you're really grabbing people via the pictures. So for me, that is very much about enhancing our group company culture, our purpose, our values, the way we are across the company that unites colleagues across 44 countries. We definitely probably have work to do on it, I think. I'm always learning, but I'm an Instagrammer
It's never
myself.
ending. It
Yeah, I'm
never
not sure
stops.
I'm
Yeah.
brilliant at it. What goes on the grid, what goes on the stories. So that's something that, yeah, it's always good to look at. We did have Twitter in the past. We don't really engage with X now. Again, I think we have sides of the business that are very focused on when you've got something that's very discussional, like energy transition, there aren't always clear answers. And a lot of it's policy led. Governments are a big factor into it. Actually, even though we're independent and we wouldn't get political, I think it's interesting to, I used to work in an educational consultancy, for instance, actually, and similarly, small tweets to kind of show that technical authority in the field and engage in the dialogue and the discussion that's going on. There is obviously a bit of a dark side sometimes there, so you have to be a bit careful, but I think that's definitely something that I wouldn't cross off. I think from those areas where there is more of a dialogue and this sort of lobbying side of things, I think can be very interesting. TikTok, though, yeah. So I'm going to admit, I am not a big TikToker. I mean, I haven't really had by that I never really TikTok. We have talked about it in the past, again, from a cultural aspect, bringing to sort of engage younger audiences in what we do. So I don't know, it's to be seen. I think to showcase what we do every day, our women and men out, offshore, on site, or at a port, supporting the sort of maritime and energy transition and energy production. That's pretty cool. And actually to give people that window onto that, it's obviously really engaging. I think TikTok's quite powerful in that regard. But then again, I think you can also really leverage Instagram for that too.
Yeah. I think jury's out for me still. I know quite a few friends who really enjoy it, but I think similarly they get sucked into that doom scrolling, and it's a way to switch off from work life and just watch something silly just for a moment. But so I think I know there's a few clients and a few conversations I've had in industry where they've said they would like to consider it, but similarly it's actually more about reaching the younger generation to encourage careers within maritime and showcase the behind the scenes of what it's like to start educating in that sort of bite-size mini videos. But you've got a lot of effort to go in to produce those really short videos. I need to look at the algorithm to see how many times they're shared or how it works and things like that, because fundamentally you've got to also look at your resource allocation and know how what the return on investment is in producing these tiny videos, if it's worth it or not. So yeah, jury's out.
Our company purpose is driving sustainability in energy and oceans, which a lot of people obviously typically always think that you're talking about environments, offshore wind and green energy, but it's not just that. Environment's only one part of it, and part of that sustainability is also really that commitment to driving the social sustainability, to keep our industries going and to make sure that we're really getting the most equitable industries out there that are going to support more and more people around the world, as many people as possibly. You need to keep building different generations of that talent and passion in the industry, not just technically, but in all the different areas. It's why seafarer well-being is something that's really close to my heart personally as well, because again, that's part of it. People don't want to join an industry that looks as if it might be not treating its people so well. I'm not saying that maritime does, but building that social sustainability is just it is so important to be always kind of educating younger people about why this could be a great career for you, what your contribution could be to making this a more sustainable industry for us all to benefit from in the future. And that's where I think, looking at the different channels, staying on top of a little bit what people are engaging with, and it is really important to sort of make sure that you are kind of speaking to other generations and also just totally different demographics. We know that maritime is very, very male dominated still, and it's changing, but slowly, and we need to really harnessing the different social channels and mediums to help encourage this dialogue of how we can make it better. It's not just about showing women on a ship or whatever. It's not that vanity piece. It is more about encouraging that dialogue, getting people talking, sharing their experiences, women sharing why they love a career in maritime and why they feel like having a much wider demographic in the industry is for the benefit of it. And that's where social media can really make a big difference, I think, because it just can be really inclusive in that way.
What we generally do a report, all of us in marketing fields, to know what's working, but we report upwards. So what goes into your monthly social update, the social element, obviously, I know you probably do, all the other bits and pieces, but to leadership. So what do you know that leadership really values that you put into your updates to help them see the value in what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, it is something that I review quite regularly, because I think that sometimes social media, it can come under sort of question, we're spending too much time in it, and we're not really spending money on it, as I've already said. But I think in that regard, it's important to review what metrics actually are really showing that value at the moment for the time and the resources put into it. And again, that is very much about the conversion side of things. Really, the key metrics that I spoke about before, that conversion, I think it's really useful to show where we're getting staff engagement with it, and the comments and reposts and things, and getting that dialogue going. I think it's important to show what mediums are working, because that obviously feeds into different resourcing across the team. I love to show the top pieces, actually. Yeah, I think it's really important, and it can range, like we've already spoken about. I mean, it's so, more often than not, it is people focused. There have been times as well that actually I find sometimes some quite technical pieces, but with some pretty cool imagery that hits really good, really strong nail on the head, and there are parts, and it may be to certain parts of staff that might think actually we're less interested in the publicity side of things, and then they see actually this is getting real engagement, so that's great. Yeah, so it's showing a bit of trying to steer away from the vanity side of things that sort of don't really mean anything, to actually this is really helping our brands. This is really helping that brand recognition in specific markets, and this is really turning into conversions, and it's then feeding through at later stages in the sales funnel. Something that constantly needs to be looked at, something that constantly needs improvement, I'm sure. But yeah, that would be what I'm kind of looking at.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. So I'm going to leave it with one final question, but it's going to be a really short one that you can answer in one sentence. So name one social activity that you stopped that nobody misses.
I need to think about that. Sorry.
No, it's fine.
One
Take your
social
time.
activity that I've stopped and nobody misses. Yeah, sort of just very quite generic evergreens.
Yes, interesting. Brilliant. Thank you. So we have covered demographics being quite important in helping you to target your content. The return on investment is also focused on internal sentiment, because fundamentally that has a massive impact on the longevity and positive outliers within the company. A weekly review of content when you are launching a campaign is very effective, because it gives you that opportunity to quickly pivot or adjust if you need. And click-through rate is hugely important, and is your go-to ROI, but also your go-to to share with leadership when you are reporting. Well, that's our conversation over with Katheen Tunkina, Group Marketing Director at ABL Group. Please do subscribe to Social Media for Business podcast, which is available on Spotify and, of course, on YouTube, one of Katie's favourite mediums, as I also agree. And also we have links on our website, so if you prefer to read, we also do a written summary to make it diverse. And please don't also forget to reshare with anybody who you think would gain some value from this season's podcast, or indeed if you want to re-watch last season's, who had equally great guests like Katie on. Thanks so much, Katie, for joining us for the Social Media for Business podcast.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. And that's it for now. Goodbye until the next episode.
Great. Take care. Bye.